Welcome to Better Together.
A place where we dive deep into everyday subjects.
We are your hosts, Julian
and Carolina, two psychologists that travel the world and are very excited about the whole human experience.
So without further ado, let's dive into the episode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Better Together. Today we have a very interesting topic that it hasn't been much of an issue in my life, but for Julian it's something that has showed up quite frequently and intensely.
And I think also for a lot of other people. It's not just my thing, but I think it's such an important thing that we really underestimate how much impact it really has in our lives.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
So the topic is decision making.
Dang.
And what do we mean by decision making? Decision making is when we are making a conscious choice, because we are making decisions absolutely all the time, and we are not aware of it, because every morning when you go to the fridge and you are choosing what to have for breakfast, that's a decision. Even though you already know what you're going to have, you could have a different thing. So you're choosing to go for the obvious choice or the routine choice. And same happens in interactions, in planning routines, and even when you're choosing stuff in the supermarket to buy. So we're making decisions all the time, but sometimes they are a bit more complex.
I guess some have problems with decisions that are where stuff is at stake. And I think that's an important part to keep in mind. Sometimes it's like, okay, what food am I taking from the fridge now? For some, that's already a difficult choice, including me sometimes. Just to decide what kind of thing you want to eat. But I think the more important one is where things are at stake. Other people's feelings, your life's path, what kind of study you want to do for the next 3 years, what kind of job you want to take. Yeah. Like those are things where time, where money, where other people are at stake in there. And I think then it becomes really important to understand how decision-making works in our mind, the process, and what kind of pitfalls there are for certain types of people and how to avoid them.
Exactly. So let's start with a story. A few months ago, we were in Uruguay and we were wanting to come back to Europe, but we had no idea where to go. And we wanted a city that was vibrant and had a good community of young people, business people, and we also wanted something that had nature and that it was close to an airport. I think those were the requirements that we had. So one day I just went into Google and I started researching cities, and I think the list that I made, and it was just a draft and it was just a while that I spent on it, had about 20 different cities in 10 different countries. So it could have been anything, really. Like we could have gone to any country. And looking at that list was intimidating. It was paralyzing because there was too much choice and we couldn't decide on where to go. And in this story, there's this phenomenon at play, which is called the paradox of choice. Do you want to introduce it?
Yeah, it's I think relatively self-explanatory. When you have to decide between two options, and I think there's an amazing TED Talk from somebody called, I think, Dr. Schwartz, who explains that really well. And I think the example which he used is a marmalade stand where a person tries to sell marmalade and has, like, I think one part has 2 or 3 options to buy from. So people can try it, can see which one they like most, take it. And then there's another, I think later on, the person had a lot more choice of 12, 20 different marmalades with different kinds of ingredients and different kinds of level of sugar and whatever. So a vast majority of different things in there. And the moral of the story is that people were more likely to take something from the table that had just like 3 options than 20 because they couldn't decide which one they want to take.
Yeah.
And so you get paralyzed when you have too many options. Or that's the paradox. We have sort of the idea that we are more happy or we feel better when we have more options, when we have the freedom to choose. But actually, that's not true.
Yeah, because when we have 3 marmalades and we get to try the 3 marmalades and we're like, okay, I'll go with orange, then you're...
Odd choice, by the way, but...
yes. And then you just go with that one and it's like, okay, I'll buy it. And it's easy to make a decision there. Or you have, it's like, do you want it with sugar or not sugar? Do you want it with seasonal berries or do you want it with kiwi from Malaysia? So then a lot of things are at stake. Is like, am I indulging in sugar or am I not? Am I taking care of my diet? Am I taking care of the environment or not? And all of this comes into play and it clouds your judgment. There's all of a sudden a lot at stake. And instead of being a happy decision between the strawberry and orange marmalade, you have a decision between like, are you the best person ever? Or are you a piece of shit that doesn't care about the planet and your health? So it's that, like it becomes that when you have too many options. So that's what happened to us when we wanted to move to Europe, but we had too many cities to choose from. And what happens in the story of the TED Talk about the marmalade is like people bought less marmalade because they couldn't decide. And usually they felt worse after having that interaction with the marmalade table. It was not like a quick, happy exchange. It was like a long and draining process. And it was the same for us when choosing a city. It was long. We went through the research phase. We couldn't choose. We were like, okay, either we go to Portugal, Estonia, Croatia, Italy, or Spain. Like some of those countries. It's like, no, it's still too many choices. And we didn't have any reference points. We knew what we wanted, but we could get it in so many places. So it was more about like, okay, where do we want to start? And if we don't like it, we just move. But still, it was paralyzing and it felt so draining. Yeah. And for 2 months, I think, we were without making a decision. And at some point, it was like, okay, if we don't buy the tickets now, they're going to become way more expensive because it was a long trip. Yeah. And you need to buy it at least 3 months ahead for it to be a reasonable price. So I don't know. It was very strange, but I started dreaming about Morocco and how I loved Morocco. I loved being in Morocco. And I was in Morocco because I was going to Spain. And I was actually living in Spain, but I was just visiting Morocco and in love with it. And I had that dream for a few nights in a row. And I was like, okay, it's about the time that we decide where we go. And this Morocco thing keeps on coming up. So then I was like, okay, let's decide, let's do this. And I think we were together, but maybe not doing the same thing. And like you were in your computer, I was in my computer or something like that. And then I opened the Google Maps. I went to Morocco. I was like, okay, hello, Morocco. What do you want? Like, or like, what's up? And then like I felt the urge to scroll up. And I scrolled up and I was like, okay, what's the city, the first city that pops up? And it was actually Marbella, which is Marbella, which is a city that is close to Malaga. Malaga would be the biggest city in the area in Spain. So then it was like, all right, let's go with that as a placeholder because it feels way better to have a decision and just explore that.
That's interesting. We had the same thing when we wanted to go to Asia. Let's just put a placeholder. And the placeholder became eventually the thing that we actually went for.
Yeah, it was Thailand.
Yeah, it was Thailand. Because it was easier to make that decision based on, okay, does it fit? Is it like good enough for us to make a decision? And it was.
Yeah.
And so then we just went with it. I think that now it makes a lot of sense because it's a lot easier to just check with that country. Is that good enough? Because otherwise we're like, oh, are we missing out? We could have gone to Vietnam. Would have that been better?
But I think in this case it was we were keeping Thailand, and it became the right choice because it was the only country taking in foreigners.
True. That
like all the borders were closed. It was COVID times.
Yeah.
So it was the only country that would let you, like with a 1 week of quarantine, that would let you stay there. So it actually became the only choice.
Fair.
Only reasonable choice.
But was it the same process, I think?
But it was a similar process. It's just like, okay, I guess we narrow down the choices. We keep a placeholder. We go with the placeholder, and then that's it.
Yeah, unless there's a red flag or something really bad, we just went with it. We just go with it, which seems to be right now a really good option.
Yeah.
Just see, okay, let's go with that. Does it have any red flags, something I really hate about it? Nope. Okay, let's check it out then.
Yeah. And we're giving it a fair shot, and we love it. So that's the update. But on the decision-making process, it was way easier to choose something and see if we can take that something out of the pedestal and be like, okay, does this meet our requirements or not? And what's like the worst downside? Can we live with the downside? And it was fine. It was fine to have the downside, and we decided to go with it. And it felt a lot more clear. Then we could get our plane tickets. Then we could start planning. So it's something unlocked. There's something when you make a decision that you stop being in the limbo of what to choose, and you start walking the path of whatever decision you made. And this is a place that you, my love, know well.
The limbo.
The limbo.
Not the path of freedom after you made a decision.
No. There's some pitfalls in decision making, but I think this one is probably one that repeats a lot.
Yeah. Let's go on the one that's most familiar with me.
Yeah.
And I think we can mention another one, the opposite. But for now, let's start with being in the limbo. And I think there are a lot of things at play. So probably a lot of you know that there is this thing that you want to make the right decision. There's a possibility that you can make the right decision and the wrong decision. And I obviously try to do the right decision because it's the right one. And while being in that mode of wanting to find the right decision, I notice that I fall into the trap of overanalyzing, sort of analysis paralysis. And it's really hard to notice when you have enough information and still stop or make a decision, and when you still need more information. Because that's I think another important step. You should always have enough information to make a decision. But not taking too much time to make a decision, otherwise you fall into the trap that I'm falling in. And then there are a lot of things that you might consider as, I don't want to make another person feel bad that might be affected by this decision. I don't want to have this advantage when making a specific decision. And I think there are so many things that could potentially be in that decision-making process that it's too much to keep in my mind and I lose track of it.
What happens there?
Then I get doubtful.
It takes over. It's like a cloud.
Yeah.
It's palpable.
It's fuzzy.
It's palpable. Like when I'm working with clients and they are going through doubt, you can feel it in everything that like they emanate this doubt. It's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And like that's probably the internal conversation going on. But the energy of it, like if you can tune in with me for a second, with the energy of doubt, like when you don't trust that you're making the right decision, or you don't trust yourself, and you go into the space of, is it right? Is it good enough? Is it like, am I? Is it? And then it just becomes like a blur. It's a blur. It's like when the TV has no signal and it's static, like it has a that kind of thing. And that's the energy of doubt that I feel when somebody's not making a decision. And it's the limbo that we're talking about. It becomes sort of like a cloud, a dark cloud that just swallows you. So please continue with the walking through the process. But it's important to acknowledge how it feels like, so we can identify it if we fall into it.
Yeah, it feels like now the comparison with the limbo, I guess, that the bar just goes lower and lower and lower and lower in your imagination, that you can't even cross it, while in fact you could actually walk through.
I'm just having a moment because you think the limbo is the dance?
Yes. What do you think it is?
Isn't it where souls that are not either good or bad, that they are like in the purgatory, sort of, like they don't go to heaven or hell, like that's the limbo?
I don't know what that means.
Oh, okay. Well,
that's interesting.
We're having a blonde moment here.
Both of us, or neither of us, I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Maybe one of us is right. Maybe neither of us is right.
Whatever.
Let us know in the comments. What do you think? Is it the dance or is it the purgatory?
Well, to follow my picture, just imagine it is the dance. Probably it's just the German version of it, I don't know.
The dance of like a stick, and you have to
go underneath
that stick.
Exactly.
With your belly up.
Yeah. And so that feels like the bar is going lower and lower all the time, while like in your mind, if you imagine it, but in your mind, in reality, you could just walk through most of the times. So the mind just makes it so fuzzy and so doubtful that it feels like the limbo bar is at your knees, where in fact you could actually walk through it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really important part, that the emotion gets at some point so difficult to deal with, so doubtful, that so many, like either a post on Instagram, a message from a friend could completely shift your perspective suddenly, shift your decision to the complete other end. That's when you notice that, okay, something is not going well. You're too loose, stuff just changes too quickly, and that's when you should take a pause.
Yeah, and you might fall into analyzing it logically, so going through the pros and cons of making each decision and finding out more information. Sometimes you don't need more information, and then you're stuck in that place. And sometimes you avoid making a decision, and your decision is to not make a decision. And that is still a choice. So just be aware that you're choosing one thing, the other, or none. And no matter what you decide, you have to live with that. And I think this is not a thing that I struggle with, as I said in the beginning, because whenever I feel the doubt coming in, I want to get out of it as soon as possible. Like if I start to question myself, second guess, overthink, then I'm like, no, just pick one thing and go with it. It's going to be fine. And it's a very clear process that I have internalized, because the moment that the doubt, like the cloud... when the cloud is starting to invade me, I'm like, no, go away. I'm not letting you in. I'm going to make a decision. And here goes a belief that supports this process. I believe that you cannot make a wrong decision. There's no wrong decision. And you can think like, yeah, but you can make you can hurt somebody, or you can choose the wrong job and then you have to quit. And in that case, I'm like, okay, that's the way the things were supposed to go. You learned new things, you made a decision, you were brave because you chose something. And I value that over making the right decision every time. And before this podcast, I was pondering if I ever made a decision that later I regretted. And I couldn't find anything, because for me, always it was making a decision. It was more important than making the right decision. So we've all
expand on that. Why is that so important to make a decision rather than doing the right decision?
I think a lot of the times is not that you will make the wrong decision, but rather you will just adjust your course. So your trajectory. You go, let's say, right or left. Do you decide to go right or left? And then you decide to go right, and it was like the longer way. But then in that longer way, you meet somebody else, and you meet a bird, and like there's this cave that you get to explore, or whatever. And yes, you could have gone left, and it was the shorter path, but that was a completely different experience. So what I think is, like, you can go right or you can go left, and it's going to be different experiences, and you will learn through it. If you have the mindset of learning that this is the right decision and I'm supposed to go through this, whether that's true or not, because we don't get to
there's no truth about it.
We don't get to play parallel universes and
to
be like, okay, A/B testing our decisions. But I choose to have the belief that whatever decision you make is right, and that's the path that you were supposed to go. So then let's say that you go right, and then after an hour of realizing that you're on the wrong path and you will never get there, and it's getting dark, you decide to go back. And then your day was just exploring the cave, saying hi to the bird and the German you found in the path. It's always a German. And that's the adventure that you had. And it doesn't mean that it was wrong. It just means that it was different. And many times, this is something that, for example, happens when you're choosing a career. It's like, which career am I going to choose? Well, any. Choose something and do it for a bit. And if you don't like it, you can change. But don't think that you're deciding the thing that you will do for the rest of your life. Like, maybe our parents had to do that, but we don't. So you still get to correct your trajectory if you feel like that's not the place that you wanted to go. You will learn. However, like, whichever decision you make, you will learn and you will have an experience. So very often it's fine whatever you choose. Like, it would have been fine for us to go to Verona or to which are the cities? Tallinn in Estonia and Dubrovnik in Croatia, Lisbon. Yeah, it would have been fine to go to any of those cities. It would have been a different experience, and we would have met different people and learned different things. But coming here was great.
Yeah. Okay, then, like, taking that in, like, there's making decision is better than making the right decision. I think that's the proposition, right? So when now somebody's stuck in that feeling that I just described, that I am in quite often, what are the key takeaways to get out of it? I think one for me is really noticing that this is the feeling that's been created and deciding to get out of it. It's really hard, but I think it's an important part to decide that I'm not going to be doubtful. And I will check on the information, either write it down or something like that, so I have it out of my mind and can make a decision and then go for it with the belief that you just described, that this decision will be the right one. Either I will learn or I will like it.
Exactly.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and whenever facing the paradox of choice, because you had too many choices, just narrow it down randomly. Yeah. And you may make not the perfect choice in the beginning, but you will learn. So if what you approach decision making with a learning mindset, then any decision and any outcome is going to be great.
Okay. I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much. And talk to you next week.
Yes, and good decision making for you.
Meanwhile, yes.
Bye-bye.